Hi, ladies. We are talking today about how your tight hip flexors are related to your low back pain. I'm Jenn Lormand, exercise physiologist.
I'm Christina Walsh, licensed physical therapist, and this is an issue that is coming up more and more. Almost all the women in our signature program are dealing with this, so we know that you might be too. Those
Yep.
chronic tight hip flexors are causing the low back tightness, compression, maybe you don't call it pain, the discomfort that you're dealing with, the way you have to always feel like you have to constantly stretch your back. That is related to your tight hip flexors directly, and we can explain.
Yeah. So, what does this feel like? This might feel like if you wanted to get on the floor and play with your kids, it's difficult to sit crisscross applesauce. Or maybe you're trying to climb to the back of your vehicle and you have a hard time getting your leg up and over. You feel stuck.
Or you try like a deep squat or lunge in any position, and you get this pinching at the front of your hip. Or you're trying to do ab work in either a pike or like that V in Pilates, and you can't feel your abs. You're trying to do crunches and all this ab work, and all you feel is your hip flexors.
Or you might be feeling clicking and popping in your hip or your SI joint. If any of that is happening, we are talking to you. So one of the ladies in our program was like, I don't really understand, how can hip flexor tightness cause back pain? So we wanted to do a little quick anatomy lesson.
We'll have to connect the dots for you about all this stuff. You're like, nobody else is really doing that for you, so you can actually understand what's going on in your body. And when you paint the picture with some pictures, it really helps to clear up what's going on. So for orientation, my trusty anatomy book is going to be our friend. I love this picture because it contextualizes where your pelvis and hips and leg bones are in your actual body. So there's your belly button, right? We're looking forward to back. You can see your tailbone and your lower lumbar vertebra right here are right behind your belly button. This is like where you put your hands on your hips. Your hip flexors connect right on this little bump on your femur bone. So you feel it in your groin very often when they're tight. Sometimes you feel it up here, but okay, low back's up here. So like what you're telling me, my hip flexors, which are down here and here, are causing my back to hurt way up here. Yes, we can explain a little bit more. Now, let's move to our model. And I had the great opportunity of doing a dissection in physical therapy school, which really drives it home when you can see it live and in person. The hip flexor is this giant muscle. And I'm treating my ladies on the table trying to explain this. I tell it's like a whacker of a muscle. It actually starts at the front of your upper lumbar vertebrae. So this is like my hips and my body right here, the lumbar vertebrae stacking up here. So it actually shares kind of connective tissue, the hip flexors on either side, with the back of the diaphragm. Y'all, this is how connected everything is. But the hip flexor is this giant muscle on either side that starts off the front of your upper lumbar vertebrae back here. And it dives in this diagonal pattern through the midsection, through the pelvis, and then attaches on the groin. So what does that mean for this guy here? It's the hip flexors are starting on either side, like way up here on the side of your spine, and taking a diagonal dive, huge muscle, right through the middle of your pelvis. Another muscle comes and joins from here, huge muscle diving through the pelvis and then connecting in your groin, that little bump on the femur bone right here. So that should illustrate why a tight hip flexor compresses your low back. It's diving from here way through there to the front here. And if it's shortening, it's grabbing and smushing down all of this, and then sometimes pulling your low back into hyperextension because it's like just so uncomfortable.
It can also create that anterior tilt that maybe you've been told you have in your pelvis.
Yes.
And you're trying to get rid of posturally. That's going to be really tough when that muscle is shortened and pulling down and pulling that pelvis forward and also pulling on that low back. So, you know, some of the women that we work with want to know, well, I don't know how this happened. And, you know, it happens differently for a lot of women, but ultimately this is your body trying to help you out, trying to protect you. And so oftentimes after we have a baby, we've lost the connection with those deep abdominals. We've lost the strength. And so the hip flexors pick up that workload. They're like, no worries, got you.
Floor has been impacted. Glutes have kicked off, which we've talked about all of this previously through that process of pregnancy and birth. And the hip flexors are like, it's okay, girl. I gotcha. I'm like right in the same neighborhood. I can handle this for a while. I'll pick up the slack. I can jump on board and do the work of these other muscles that are,
Yeah.
you know, they've been through a lot. I'm going to help. So it's like Jen said, this is your body trying to help you out. But what happens then is it gets stuck in this pattern because we don't get any sort of input or safe and correct input to volley that control of your core and your hips and your pelvis back to the muscles you want to be doing the work. The deep abdominals,
Yeah.
the outer buttocchikas, as Jen likes to call them, those glutes, the pelvic floor and those low back muscles, the stabilizers that are supposed to be doing that work for you. And instead the hip flexors are like, I got you, honey. But then when they're doing that wrong job for too long, they're just getting tighter and tighter. And those other muscles that you want to be turning on are getting weaker and weaker. And then you end up in these chronic patterns of pain and you feel it in the ways that we described at the beginning.
And it's important to remember that tightness is weakness. And so these become extremely weak muscles that, you know, oftentimes the women that come to work with us, they are active. They are trying to exercise their way out of this. And yes, that can be done. That's part of what we teach. It's why we're passionate about our methodology and how we teach to reprogram these muscles to come on board functionally. But you cannot, there is no workaround to this.
And there's no power through it.
Mhm.
That's for sure. Many of you who are here and who work with us are go-getters. You're motivated, you're type A, you're check things off the list, you're go, you're power through, I can do this. That's awesome, but you can't address this that way. More Pilates isn't going to fix it.
No.
Lifting heavier, harder, stronger, pushing more and pushing through
aggressive trigger point work
also
can
not going to fix it.
create some issues there as
Yeah,
well.
and especially if you're hypermobile, which a lot of you here with us also are. That adds another layer of complication. We'll get into that more later. But a good way to start arresting this pattern is to click the link either below the video or in the bio and get our back and hip relief technique.
Yeah.
It's our 90-90 decompression. It sets you in an anti-gravity position that allows those hip flexors for the first time, probably in ages, to go,
to let go.
and it does the same thing for your fight or flight system. It is an absolute gift to yourself to spend 5 to 10 minutes in that position, and you can get those hip flexors to finally turn off. You've probably forgotten what it feels like. It's amazing.
And while you're getting those turned off, you're also allowing the back to decompress, which is oftentimes what these ladies complain about the most. You've kind of forgotten about the hip flexors because you're at the stage of, I just feel like my back is so tight and compressed
all the time.
All the time. If I have to sit for long periods of time, if I have to stand for long periods of time, I am miserable and I'm tired of this and I'm ready to get a solution. So if that's you, come and join us for sure. Go and grab that 90-90 back and hip relief, and
it's free and it works. You're going to love it.
We will see you next time.